Peter Paul Rubens made this painting of Thetis dipping her son, the infant Achilles, into the river Styx. Thetis is a goddess of the sea. So why is she doing this to her son? So basically, she is married to King Peleus, the father of Achilles, who is mortal. He is not a god. And so she wants her son to be protected by the waters of the river Styx. But when he's dipping him, he needs to hold him from the heel. And that is the famous Achilles heel. It's the only vulnerable part that Achilles will have in his body that is not protected by the river Styx. In this fresco that is found in Herculaneum from the 1st century of the Common Era, we see Chiron the centaur, who was the mentor and teacher of Achilles during his youth. Achilles becomes the very close friend of Patroclus. They are almost inseparable. And what we see here in this calyx is a tondo, which is a round image on pottery, which is Attic red figure on a black background. In other words, it's from Attica, and its red figures are painted on the black background. The calyx are these very shallow pottery vessels where they used to drink wine. So if you were to look at it from the top, this is what's depicted in the bottom. And this is Achilles, who is tending Patroclus' wounds. There's a lot of other images of Achilles and Patroclus, but this is probably one of the best known. It's in the Altes Museum in Berlin, and it dates from about 500 before the Common Era. It's from Bucci in Italy. So we're going to move on to the Iliad and the narrative of the Iliad. This is a wooden board that was found in Egypt, and it's inscribed in ink with some phrases from the Iliad. This dates actually from 4 to 500 of the Common Era, and we have to remember that the Trojan War is believed to have been fought anywhere between 1299 to 1100 before the Common Era, during the Bronze Age in the Mediterranean. So the accounts and the pottery images that we have of these events are probably 700 to 800 years after the Trojan War. The Iliad begins at the end of the Trojan War. There's been 9 years of fights and war between the Achaeans or Greeks and the Trojans. And as much as the humans are fighting, the gods are also fighting. They're taking their sides. And in this particular vase, what we see here from an Apulian red figure crater from about 360 to 350 before the Common Era, and it's found in the Louvre in Paris, we see Chrysos, who is trying to ransom his daughter Chryseis from Agamemnon. And Agamemnon is saying, I don't care for all your gold and all your silver. We do know that Troy was very rich. And Agamemnon says, I don't care. I want to keep her because it's a matter of pride. We won that battle. And she is a representation of all the spoils of war that we get. So he doesn't want to return the daughter of Chrysos. And sure enough, Apollo, who has always been favoring the Trojans, is really upset at this attitude from Agamemnon. He has a lot of other things. Why doesn't he just want to return this girl to her father? So this is the famous Apollo of Belvedere. If you ever go to Rome and the Vatican, just don't overlook this magnificent statue from about 120 to 140 of the Common Era. It's just absolutely beautiful, the Apollo in Belvedere. So Apollo is so upset at Agamemnon that he starts shooting arrows that are infected with a plague on all the Achaeans. And the Achaeans are actually telling Agamemnon there's other kings there, and they're coming and saying, look, this is ridiculous. Just return the girl. You know, we cannot really put up with this. But Agamemnon does not want it because it's a status of being the king and saying whatever he wants is what goes. So what we see in this fresco from Pompeii is that we see that Achilles is actually bringing to Agamemnon the other girl that he also got from the same spoils of war. Her name is Briseis, and what happens is Achilles actually understands that in order to stop the wrath of Apollo and in order to get this moving and stop this plague, we need to return the other girl. And Agamemnon is not budging. So Achilles says, look, I'll give you my girl and you return the other girl to her father. Now, this makes Achilles really upset. Why does he have to give up his own prize? It's a war trophy. It's a symbol. It's a status. And he's actually upset because he was the one who won both girls and he gave uh, Chryseis to Agamemnon as a gift. And now he doesn't have either of the two girls. He cannot show how good he was. But he's doing this because he knows they need to stop Polo. And that's the only way to do it. So there's really a lot of personality fights in here between Agamemnon's stubbornness and Achilles' pride. So Achilles is really upset. He does do this. Agamemnon does return Chryseis, and Apollo stops his wrath. But Achilles says, you know what? I am not going to fight anymore. And I'm going to tell all the Achaeans to just go back home and leave Agamemnon alone and see what he can do with it. In this particular depiction, which dates from about 480 to 470 BCE, and it's again an Attic red figure cup on a black background. So this is actually depicting Achilles sulking. That's where he is. He is upset. He doesn't want to fight. He's telling all the Achaeans, don't fight, just leave Agamemnon. And he actually wants to give Agamemnon a lesson in saying, you see how much you need me and my armies. If I don't fight, you're not going to be doing very well in this particular war. The Trojan War continues. There's more battles, and at some point the Achaeans are winning, but then Hector, leading the Trojans, is really causing havoc to the Achaeans. And this is where things get very difficult for the Achaeans. The Trojans are really winning. So things don't really go very well for the Achaeans. And Achilles is still sulking when Patroclus, his very good friend, just comes to Achilles and says, look, I understand you don't want to fight. I understand this was unfair, but why don't you let me lead the Myrmidons, our army? Give me your armor, and I will lead them in the battle to, against the Trojans. So it is interesting that Patroclus is asking Achilles for his armor. So what was so special about this armor? We don't have a depiction that's contemporary to the Trojan War of these armors, but we do have several depictions. These are from about 500 BCE. We see Achilles fighting against Memnon, and behind them are Thetis, who is Achilles' mother and the goddess that protects him the most, and Eos, who is a goddess that's protecting Memnon. And the other vase that I found with some sort of armor that we can see from Achilles is here, Achilles killing the Amazon queen Penthesilea. So even though these are interpretations that are about 700 or 800 years after the Trojan War, we have an idea that Achilles' armor has always been depicted as something that was better than others, which is the reason why Patroclus is probably asking him for the armor when he is leading the Myrmidons. So what happened is that even though with Achilles' armor, Patroclus is killed. He is killed by Hector. And you can see here the Greeks and the Trojans actually fighting over the body of Patroclus that's laying down on the floor in this particular vase that's in Athens, Greece. It's also from about 500 before the Common Era, this depiction. In this relief, that is now a little bit more recent, from 100 to 200 before the Common Era. What we see in this Etruscan relief is how Menelaus, who is Agamemnon's brother, is bringing Patroclus' body. There's other figures in there, but they're bringing his dead body back to the encampment. And in this particular Roman sculpture, we also see Menelaus bringing the dead body of Patroclus back. If you can see in both depictions, Patroclus has no armor. So where is that famous armor that Patroclus was actually wearing from Achilles? Why is he naked? Is this just basically artistic liberty that the depiction wanted to be more dramatic of the dead body? Well, no, I mean, you can see the others are dressed, and you can see as dramatic figures when they're dressed or not. The reason why Patroclus is depicted with no clothes is because the armor was taken by Hector. And there's not that many depictions of Hector that I found, probably because Trojans lost, and the story is taken and it's actually transmitted to us by the Greeks. But in this particular amphora, what we see is Hector's last visit with his wife Andromache and his infant son Astyanax. This is from about 370 to 360 BCE, and it's found in Puglia. So what you see here is basically that big helmet that, the sun's reaching out. You can see the shield. You don't see Hector with an armor. So it doesn't really explain in the Iliad if Hector took the armor, the Achilles armor, from Patroclus to wear it himself, or just as a war trophy. But Hector is the one that took that armor, and there was a significance to it from the time that Patroclus asked Achilles to wear it. So now Hector is the one who has it. So what we see here is that, of course, Thetis now wants to help her son. Now Achilles is in total rage. The rage of Achilles over the death of Patroclus. He feels not only angry, but also there's a lot of sentiment there of perhaps guilt. There's been a lot of interpretations of the Iliad. But basically, because he did not want to fight and Patroclus was wearing his armor, Patroclus is dead. So now he wants to fight against the Trojans. So what we see here from Peter Paul Rubens is a depiction narrative that has Vulcan, the god of the forge, presenting this magnificent new armor to Thetis to bring to her son. Now, in this other depiction, we have a pottery depiction in another calyx, which is an Attic red figure also on the black background. And you see here Hephaestus. Hephaestus is the Greek name of Vulcan. Vulcan is the Roman name, but it's the same god, is the god of the forge. And you can see how he's presenting the armor, and you can see Thetis has now a big shield, and also there's a helmet in there. So these narratives are telling us Thetis is getting new equipment for her son to go and fight. The particular shield is interesting because there's, again, no depiction that is the same for all of the different places where I found them, where I found Achilles with a shield, but this was interpreted by Angelo Monticelli in 1815 from a verbal description of how this armor should be. If you're interested, you can take a look. I found most of this information in Wikipedia. So here is Thetis, and she is bringing the new armor with a shield. As you can see, the shields are represented differently depending where they are. But in this particular vase, the pottery, what you see now is polychromatic pottery, and it's from about 575 to 550 before the Common Era. It's in the Louvre in Paris, and she is now presenting everything that Hephaestus made for him, all the armor and the shield especially is what's more notable to Achilles. And you can see in the Greek letters their names. So it's really easy to know what this is depicting. This chariot you can see in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. If you go to their webpage, you will see the story behind it. Of course, if you can go to the museum, it's always very nice to see it. It's in a very nice glass cabinet. And in their documentation, they quote actually the Scientific American from 1903, where this description of the archaeological finds and the different things that were found with this chariot were described. This is Etruscan. The reason why I'm showing this is because what is the main theme is Thetis now presenting the armor to her son Achilles. So this was a very common theme, and it was something that everybody understood. This has a very important meaning. And you can see here also there's a helmet and there's a shield. So those are important things that Thetis is presenting her son. Not only she actually immersed him in the river Styx, but she's also giving him an armor that has been forged by none other than the god of the forge. So this is very important. The mother is protecting the son. So what you see here is Achilles does go with his new armor, and what you see in this Attic black figure. So in this case, from Attica, we have this pottery where the figures are painted in black and the background is red. So these are the different styles of pottery. And what you're seeing here is Achilles dragging the body of Hector. So when Achilles finally goes and in revenge of Patroclus' death, he kills Hector and he drags his naked body around in the chariot. This dates from about 520 to 510 BCE, again about 700 to 800 years after the Trojan War. So in this statue I presented before, it's the death of Achilles, and it's in Corfu at the Achilleon. We can actually see eventually it doesn't really matter how many shields, who forged his armor, and how good his armor was, or the helmet. Of course, Achilles had a weak spot. And this arrow from Paris hits him exactly on that heel where he was not protected, and he dies. Nevertheless, that shield and his armor are actually extremely famous, and they are actually so important that Odysseus and Ajax fight over that armor. Odysseus finally wins and presents the armor to Neoptolemus, who is Achilles' son. So the armor and the shield have a significance that goes beyond the fact that, first of all, Patroclus dies with the first armor from Achilles, and then Achilles dies with the second one. Nevertheless, having that armor and having that shield, and perhaps the armor includes that helmet because it's depicted everywhere, it is an important thing that mortals want to have and they fight over. What I am showing here is a map of the Omicron variant of the SARS-CoV-2. We have in the green box, it's the sequence for the whole spike protein. And within that spike protein sequence, you see there a blue box that says NTD, an orange box that says RBD, and within it, the RBM. This is particularly the receptor binding domain, where the spike protein has the piece of the virus that will bind our cells, and that's the way the virus is infective. And what you see in the different letters and numbers are the different mutations that are found. There are about 30 mutations in the spike protein, and 15 of them are found within the orange box, the RBD. Now, in the illustration, how does this look when you see the whole protein? What you see here is looking at the spike protein from the top, and then you see the side view of the protein. And the mutations are identified in colors. When there's amino acid substitution, so instead of one amino acid, it's another one, it's a yellow dot. The amino acids that have been deleted from the original strain are actually the red ones. So the red ones are where there's no original sequence in there. And finally, when there's an insertion, a new sequence is in green. It's a little bit hard to see, but that's where it is in the view from the top. And you can also see that green insertion in the lateral view. Most of these mutations, as you can see, look yellow. So in other words, they are substitutions of amino acids. This is important because if our immune system is looking at the spike protein and there's a substitution from one amino acid to another, our antibodies may actually still identify the substitution because the amino acids could be close enough that our antibodies could bind them. When there's a deletion, if your antibodies were actually just identifying those particular amino acid sequences, then they are deleted, they're no longer there, and then our antibodies may not be able to identify this variant. That is why it is important to know in this particular variant what is happening in terms of these mutations and where are these mutations located. So this is the spike protein from the wild type SARS-CoV-2, and that's the basis for the vaccines that we have available. The idea is that our immune system will see the spike protein. I refer you to other videos in my channel where I explain there's different technologies or platforms. Sometimes they use RNA, they might use DNA, they might use proteins. But ultimately, the idea is that our immune system is going to see that spike protein, either the whole protein or a piece of it. So that when we encounter that spike protein, our antibodies bind the spike protein and neutralize the virus. In other words, they did not allow the virus to infect us. Let me overimpose now the sequence of Omicron just as an illustrative way to tell you, let's look at the yellow antibody. It's binding a region where we have a red dot, and a red dot in Omicron means a deletion. It means that amino acid from the original spike protein is not there in Omicron. So if we have antibodies that bound that particular area, identifying that amino acid that is no longer there in Omicron, that antibody from the vaccination is not going to bind Omicron and neutralize it. Likewise, I put in purple an antibody that would be binding a cluster of yellow dots. The yellow dots are amino acid substitutions. Not all of the substitutions are going to be immunologically different as an antigen, but some of them will be. So let's imagine that this purple antibody is also going to fail identifying Omicron because it's identifying the original sequence and in a place where now there's a cluster of substitutions. So those two antibodies from the vaccine are not going to neutralize Omicron, but the other antibodies that we produced from the vaccine are going to be successful in neutralizing Omicron. Vaccines produce polyclonal antibody responses. So that's a good way of protecting ourselves against the variants. And the good news is that the future generation of vaccines are now going to be using the most common, the most prevalent of the variants that are causing disease. And year after year, what's going to happen is that we get updated vaccinations to protect us against the current variants that are causing disease. I refer you to the different references that I have. although there's a lot of references in the literature about this. So in my mind, what we do with the vaccination, this particular targeted immune vigilance and protection, is like the special shield from Achilles that Thetis had made for him, even when she knew that she had protected him, dumping him in the river Styx. She still knew that he needed a special protection, which for SARS-CoV-2, I'm saying it's the vaccine. This is another representation of Thetis dipping Achilles into the river Styx. It's a marble statue by Thomas Banks, made in 1789, and it's in the V&A Museum. So she knew that she was protecting her son with the waters from the river Styx. And in my mind, this is a little bit like natural immunity. We can respond to viruses thanks to antibodies that could be passed from the mother to the child in breastfeeding, and also by good nutrition, by good hygiene, in general good health, people mount better immune responses. So this is the care that we can have for natural immunity. Now, this particular natural immunity could work when we have new variants coming in, but they may not work as well, and also they may identify the virus, but it could be outside the spike protein. So you can find sometimes people who do have antibodies, but they do get sick. And that's why Thetis knew that she had to provide her son Achilles with a more specific and powerful defense, which was that special armor made by Hephaestus. So in general, what I see is that the vaccine will be helping us with that special shield that now identifies a spike protein and can protect us even with variants that may not be identified by all the antibodies. However, even when Achilles had this protection from the river Styx and he had the armor and that special shield, he still died because that arrow hit his Achilles heel, which was the vulnerable area where that single arrow produced his death. And so how can we protect ourselves? We have the natural immunity, as I mentioned. We can try to say we have good health, we maintain good habits, we presumably are helping our body to have a better immune response. We get vaccinated, and we still could have that Achilles heel. So what should we do? I urge everybody to still maintain social distancing and do like T-Rex here. He's been vaccinated, but he's wearing a mask. And the mask is covering correctly the nose and mouth. T-Rex is outside the Science Museum in Boston, and he's been wearing this mask all this time. He never took it off. Now, it is important to say that the mask is not protecting T-Rex. The mask is protecting us. So if T-Rex still has that virus, even though he doesn't get sick because he's vaccinated, he could be spreading it. And that's the reason why the mask and social distancing are a social way of protecting each other. It's not protecting just yourself. So in addition to maintaining good health, in addition to getting vaccinated, please wear a mask and consider maintaining the social distancing as much as you can. And let's hope that this disease can be under control in the near future so we can go back to not wearing masks and not keeping social distancing. I hope you liked this video. I hope it was useful. And please check my channel, subscribe, and check other videos in my channel. Thank you very much.